At this point in the course, we're going to actually get our hands on some ASP.NET. And I want to start off by covering in about the next 7 videos one common subject, which is a web form. Now, a web form it has a one-to-one relationship to a web page. And I want to show you one. Let's go to Programs, VisualStudio.net. Open that up, and let's take a look at one of our earlier examples, ASP.NET video. And I want you to understand that what you're looking at right here, this is a web form. And whatever I do to this web form, obviously, is my web page. And so if I want to add things to this, then this is what's going to appear on my web page. And so for every web form I have, that's a web page in my website or my application. Okay? So let's close this, and then let's go back and understand that a web form is the basic building block of a web page, okay? It is HTML, and it's the code that programmatic code that we put on the page to provide other kinds of functionalities. In this course, that of course would be VisualBasic.net. Now, web form is also controls, and this could be the ASP.NET controls that we put on there, web controls. We'll talk about those a little bit later. So this collection then becomes what we know as a web form. Now, this web form executes on a web server running IIS, and I want to emphasize this word right here, executes. That's the magic of ASP.NET. I've said this, I know, about 3 million times, and you're probably tired of hearing it. But when we take this collection of HTML code and controls, and we give it that ASPX extension, and then we request it, it gets compiled, and then it executes on the web server as compiled code. Now, this is huge, and of course we're talking about Internet Information Server. Now, the web form, once it's compiled, this thing generates HTML for the client. So keep in mind, it takes our code, our programming logic, our HTML, and from that generates new HTML that gets sent out to the client. Now, this is huge because some of these controls are smart, and they look at the headers that came in to see what kind of web browser and what version requested them, and then they render themselves in HTML version level that makes them behave properly in the requesting web browser. Now, the code and controls stay on the server. Okay, and keep that in mind. They stay on the server. This is the couple of advantages here. Number one, security, because what we code, nobody can ever see when they use our web pages. They stay there. Now, understand, we've now split our web application or our web page into 2 definite pieces. And in this course, we're concentrating on the server side, the ASP.NET. Now, keep in mind, you can still do client-side user interface things. You can put JavaScript out there and have it execute in the browser on the client side, and we'll talk about how to do that a little bit later. But you still have the client functionality if you want it. Now, a web form is also known as an ASPX page, an ASP.NET page, or a web page. You'll hear these terms used and interchanged quite a bit out there. But understand they're all the same thing. You may even hear them called an application page. Now, ASP and ASP.NET can coexist on the same server, and this is not a problem. Now, this is one of the main reasons that ASP.NET has been one of the fastest portions of the .NET framework to be accepted out there, because the file extension on the file determines how it's handled. If it has an ASP extension, then the ASP interpreter that's part of the operating system, Windows 2000 or XP, grabs that ASP, interprets it line by line, and sends it out. And then if it sees ASPX, then of course the ASP.NET portion picks it up, compiles it, and then renders it and sends it back out to the client. So the file extension that you probably determines the handling, and these can coexist on the same server, web server, with no problem whatsoever. So if you have an ASP application, you can, for the most part, slowly over time, kind of graduate this thing to ASP.NET simply by when you change functionalities, convert it over to ASP.NET, and just let those pages sit out there side by side. So the thing to remember from this video is that A web form is a web page, and there's a one-to-one relation to those. And when you create a web form in VisualStudio.net, you are in fact creating a web page. And this is the concrete block that we're going to use to build this house that is our application. We will use a number of web forms to create a number of pages and then link those things together.